Coming up on Network Africa. Nigeria marks Democracy Day as President Bola Tinubu pays tributes to the heroes of the nation's democracy. US and Saudi Arabia condemn return to violence in Sudan. Plus, Uganda's president dispels death rumors after contracting COVID-19. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Joke Rogers here in Lagos. As Nigeria marks Democracy Day today, President Bola Tinubu has been paying tributes to the heroes of the nation's democracy, whose sacrifices laid the foundation for the country's uninterrupted democracy in the last 24 years. Speaking in his first broadcast to the nation since he assumed office, President Tinubu explains that every June 12 is a reminder of the roles played by this group of Nigerians that set the country on its current path.
We celebrate a day that has remained a watershed in our nation's history, not just today, but for every June 12, for the endless future that our beloved country shall exist and work stronger and stronger. Generation of Nigerians will always remember themselves that the democracy that is steadily going to become the defining essence of our polity was not gifted to us on a silver platter. We can easily recall the sacrifice and the martyrdom of Chief MKO Abiola, the custodian of the sacred mandate that was so cruelly annulled. Every day on this day, down the ages, we will recall the several heroes of democracy, such as Kudirat Abiola, wife of Chief Abiola, who was brutally murdered while in the trenches fighting on the side of the people. We remember Pat Alfred Rwani, one of the heroes of our independence struggle, and Major General Shehu Musaya Adua, retired, who was silenced by the military junta while in pursuit of democracy.
President Tinubu also used the occasion to speak on the election that brought him into office. He says while the winners are celebrating their victory, those who are not satisfied with the outcome should not despair, since in politics, there's always another day.
It is only natural that even as those who won and experienced victory in various elections are elated and fulfilled, those who lost are disenchanted and disappointed. But the beauty of democracy is that those who win today can lose tomorrow, and those who lose today will have an opportunity to compete and win in the next rounds of elections. Those who cannot endure and accept the pains of defeat in elections do not deserve the joy of victory when it is their turn to triumph. Above all, those who disagree with the outcome of the elections are taking full advantage of the constitutional provisions to seek redress in court. That is one of the reasons why democracy is the best form of government invented by man.
Well, following the outcry that has greeted his Inauguration Day speech on this removal of fuel subsidy, President Tinubu admits that the decision will impose extra burden on the masses. However, he assures that the sacrifice will not be in vain.
The decision will impose extra burden on the masses of our people. I feel your pain. This is one decision we must bear to save our country from going under and take our resources away from the stranglehold of a few unpatriotic elements. Painfully, I have asked you, my compatriots, to sacrifice a little more for the survival of our country. For your trust and belief in us, I assure you that your sacrifice shall not be in vain. The government I lead will repay you through massive investment in transportation, infrastructure, education, regular power supply, healthcare, and other public utilities that will improve the quality of lives.
And the president is also charging all that have been elected into various offices to see their election as a sacred trust from Nigerians and one they must be ready to defend vigorously.
I enjoy all of us, to rededicate ourselves to strengthening this form of government of free people that has been our guiding light these past 24 years. In particular, those of us who have been privileged to elect into public office at various levels in both the executive and legislative arms of government must recommit ourselves to offering selfless service to the people and delivering concrete democracy dividend in accordance with our electoral promises. On my part and that of my administration, I pledge anew our commitment to diligently fulfilling every component of our electoral pact with the people, the Renew Hope agenda. We shall be faithful to truth, faithful to equity, and faithful to justice. We shall exercise our authority and mandate to govern with fairness, respect for the rule of law, and commitment to always upholding the dignity of all our people.
And according to President Tinubu, the recent harmonization of the retirement age for judicial officers is meant to strengthen the rule of law while assuring that more reforms will follow in the judiciary. He's quick to add that unnecessary illegal orders used to truncate or abridge democracy in the past will no longer be tolerated. Let's get more on Nigeria's Democracy Day celebration 30 years after the June 12, 1993 elections. Joining us now is Yinka Oyoniji, African Affairs Analyst for discussions on Democracy Day. He joins us from the United Kingdom. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So let's begin with your assessment of the President's Democracy Day speech.
I think it was a great speech, actually. I looked at it and it reflected exactly what the president had been stating since they first got elected, which is to bring some form of renewed hope to Nigerians. It was a reflection of that. The first disappointment in the speech was the reference to Arnold Toynbee, a British economist, regarding how the president views the perilous times that we are in. Mr. President stated, using Arnold Toynbee, his own explanation about how societies evolve is that the challenges we find ourselves in would necessarily be as a result of external forces, the environment. But I beg to disagree. I think that Mr. President should have considered making reference to erstwhile statesmen and later in the speech, but it could have been good to open his first democracy speech with that. I mean, we've got Kwame Nkrumah, we've got quite so many, Nelson Mandela. Our own leaders are cited abroad. Why don't we cite our own leaders in the context of our own problems and challenges? So I didn't think that a reference to an autonomy was apt in a way to look at the administration and what the citizens expect from this democracy. Instead, what we should do is to reflect and consider that the government is a reflection of who we are, and so all of us have a role to play, irrespective of our tribes, ethnic lineage, religious sentiments, as they may be. The president has a huge mission at this time, which we cannot exactly see being handled, which is about healing, and then bringing everybody together. The president requires to put elder statesmen and women in charge of that, regardless of their political leanings, to be able to bring some hope, succor, and a true reflection of healing in our nation after a much, keenly contested elections, if you like. So it was a message of hope. It's beautiful, but we should start again considering messages of hope and unity from within African context.
Right. So in your opinion, how has Nigeria fared since it did gain democracy?
Well, so again, I'm going to make a statement that may be controversial, but again, maybe it needs to be said. I think that it's about time that we stop blaming military for whatever problem we've had in Nigeria. Military incursion, we placed so much emphasis on it for so long. But it is a question to ask ourselves again, the kind of government that we deserve or that we require in Africa and Nigeria may not necessarily be a Western definition of democracy. There may be times when we have to look ourselves in the eye and almost lean towards autocracy. There are other times that we listen to everybody, but even democracy can be very expensive. So if you look at it from, let's take let's go down memory lane from 1999 till date, cost of governance has been huge, and something has to be done about that. It's also an opportunity for me to challenge statements that I've made in the past regarding cost of governance. An erstwhile federal budgetary officer stated that saving 187 billion will not move the needle with respect to cost of governance. I thought that was inhumane. And I thought that was pretty thoughtless, and I thought that it was not facing reality. The day citizens begin to see that government is cutting cost of governance, that government or officials elected are practicing what they preach, then it will not be so difficult for citizens to take a buy-in and have a sense of belonging in government. So it is critical for us to understand that tough decisions will be made. However, citizens' engagement should be top priority. So if we look at our democracy, it's about time that we unshackle ourselves from what we call global standards or world standards. Let's start charting a new course for African standards where we don't allow our differences to tear us apart, but instead bring us together. So there's a lot more that needs to be done. I would have thought that Mr. President, one of the first decisions he will make is regarding the electoral process. Okay, that last electoral process, it's not enough for presidential spokesperson or ministers for information to say it's the freest and fairest. It's about time that we start taking a look ahead. In a few months, we will be talking about elections in Ondo State, in Edo State, in Imo State. What lessons have we learned from the last electoral process? And how do we reposition our nation in such a way that we won't have apathy? And then there won't be suppression of voters. Those are cogent decisions to be made alongside such economic decisions like removal of the fuel subsidy.
Right, so when a new administration comes aboard, it brings with it new ideas, new visions, new plans to the table. This is a new administration. What would you say should be the priority this time?
So what I would say is priority. I mentioned them in my last two answers, and it is back to giving Nigerians a sense of belonging. I mean, I'll tell you something that's happened since Monday. Interestingly, quite a number of people have been in so many disagreements, conflicts over the Democracy Day speech. It's alarming. Whereas presidential candidates who contested in the last elections also made their own statements. But it's almost seen as if whatever question we raise at this time of genuinely elected public officials is taken the bad way. That's not what we should do. Mr. President should realize, and that's another thing that fault in his speech. He was saying something about those who have not taken electoral laws nicely, in his own words, or that they've not embraced the electoral results, that they are not deserving of victory. I thought that was below the belt. It lies here in the mouth of Mr. President at this point to cast aspersions and appear to be bullish against those who may not have won the elections, as it were, at this moment, which we should start considering with respect to an amendment to our electoral process. Why should we swear in any public official when we have not finished the process from court? All right? Because Mr. President has made quite a number of cogent decisions in the last 2-3 weeks. Suspension of the CBN governor, signing laws, okay, and then also introducing economic processes that have far-reaching consequences. What happens in a situation, if it does happen, that the court says otherwise, and that this president has not been validly elected? We would have wasted a lot of money, lives would have been lost, and there may be increase in insecurity. So it is important to look electoral amendments in the face and make those tough decisions to say we will exhaust all opportunities there are for a redress before we start the business of governance in earnest. So we deserve an amendment to electoral process. It is also imperative for Mr. President to win the hearts of Nigerians by calling everybody on board. All right. I thought that by now the president would have submitted a list of his ministers. We do know that he has a number of brilliant people around him. What are we waiting for? Why don't we have our ministers yet? We must constitute cabinet at about this time so that we can make cogent decisions. I mean, there are issues in law at the moment, but we don't have a substantive attorney general. So let us constitute cabinet already. Let us win the hearts of Nigerians so that we all move away from the electioneering process to a nation building that we deserve. I don't think that many people doubt the competence of the president to deliver, but now is the time to hit the ground running.
Right. African Affairs Analyst Yinka Oyiniji, thank you for your time today.
Thank you too.
Welcome back to the program. The United States and Saudi Arabia have condemned the resumption of violence in the Sudanese capital, Khartoum, where residents have reported airstrikes and exchanges of artillery fire. In a joint statement, the two countries noted that the Sudanese army and the paramilitary rapid support forces had controlled their forces during a 24-hour ceasefire, and it was deeply disappointing that fighting had resumed. A pro-democracy neighborhood group said shells had landed in people's homes in the south of the capital following the expiry of ceasefire. One resident who was awoken by the sound of fighting said the one-day lull on Saturday was like a dream that had now vanished. And the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights says it remains concerned by the continued devastating impact of the fighting in Sudan on civilians. According to spokesperson Jeremy Lawrence, they are also concerned by reports of conflict-related sexual violence, with the office receiving credible reports of 12 incidents. Mr. Lawrence reiterated the High Commissioner's call on both parties to the fighting to ensure the protection of civilians and respect for international humanitarian law and international human rights law.
We are concerned by the continued devastating impact of the fighting on Sudan on civilians. This week alone, an attack striking a busy livestock market in the capital Khartoum left at least 8 civilians dead, among them at least 3 members of the same family. The airstrike on Al Muwalliya market on the 7th of June was allegedly carried out by the Sudan Armed Forces. In another incident, on the 7th of June, a child was reportedly killed after a shell hit his family home in the Al-Shadra district in southern Khartoum. We received reports of the killings of 4 other civilians in Khartoum on the 5th of June. And on the 4th of June, at least 3 civilians, all members of the same family, including a pregnant woman, were reportedly killed. We were also concerned by reports of conflict-related sexual violence. Since the fighting began, our office has received credible reports of 12 incidents of sexual violence related to the conflict against at least 37 women, although the number could be far higher. In at least 3 incidents, the victims were young girls. In one case, 18 to 20 women were reportedly raped. Our office has learnt of a list circulating on social media accusing certain journalists of being supporters of the RSF. We have observed comments on Facebook calling for the killing of the journalists on this list.
Authorities and partners to identify.
Elsewhere, Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni is said to still be self-isolating after testing positive to COVID-19. The president tweeted this on Sunday night following rumours that he had died after contracting the virus. Mr. Museveni tested positive for the 7th of June and said that the following day that he was taking forced leave. He's urging Ugandans to go for COVID vaccination and booster shots, especially the elderly. Rumours have emerged on Twitter over the past few days that Mr. Museveni had been transferred to intensive care and later died from COVID-19 complications. And the Namibian president is thanking citizens of his country and other well-wishers around the world after going through a medical procedure in neighbouring South Africa. The presidency had earlier said that his medical team had, during a routine medical checkup, detected mild aortic stenosis or narrowed heart valve without any symptoms. According to them, the operation in South Africa had been successful and the president remains fit and healthy due to resume work on Tuesday. 6 police officers are due to go on trial in Switzerland on charges of manslaughter in connection with the death of a Nigerian man 5 years ago. Mike Ben Peter died after being arrested in the city of Lausanne. Police say they used standard techniques to apprehend the alleged drug dealer, even as officers pinned him to the ground after he refused to be searched in 2018. The defense is to argue that Mike Ben Peter's death was likely to have been a result of underlying health problems. The dead man's family and anti-racist groups in Switzerland have drawn parallels to the death of George Floyd, who was killed by police in the United States in Minneapolis. And in the bid to promote African art, culture and heritage, some indigenous artists have come together to launch 5 years of projects. This launch aims to push the various governments on the continent to allocate more funds for the industry.
On a small stage decorated with bright lights in the Addis Ababa region, artists from African countries play music pieces of their respective countries as partygoers danced, mingled and enjoy wines to celebrate the launch of 5 years of project. The project is called Connect for Culture Africa, CFCA, and is launched by the African Union in collaboration with Selam Ethiopia, a non-governmental organization that uses film, music and circus performances to address issues such as women's rights. The project aims to push African governments to allocate at least 1% of their budgets to the arts.
want to empower artists. A lot of artists, they want to participate in these discussions about good governance, human rights, but they are scared of the sort of the consequences. But if they are united, then they will not be scared to talk about these issues. They will not be scared about making music to educate the community or talk against corruption and other ills of the society.
Held on Africa Day, the concert hosted artists and bands from Ghana, Ethiopia, and Tanzania.
People, they forget to give education to the artists. Even when you see our governments are funding other things, but it's very rare you go to the university, you see there's a fund for the art students. So we hope that if there will be a good budget to our governments, there will be something to support the artists to get education.
Stakeholders hope that a good budget to the arts and culture will help artists to be better educated.
Africa is one continent that is very rich in culture. I mean, there are certain things that you see in there that can relate with my culture. There are certain things that you can see there that relate with certain cultures that we've been exposed to. But in more than anything else, I think I like the energy that I'm seeing there, because our African culture has always been about energy, about happiness, about enthusiastic. And you see by those groups, they are really belting up, they are giving it all.
Hundreds of revelers from Ethiopia and other African countries attended the concert, with music performances featuring saxophones, guitars, drums, and traditional Ethiopian music instruments, enjoying the heartbeat music and a sip of wine.
That's the program today. Thank you for watching. I'm Joke Rogers.